Hi everyone, Mark Merrill with Firm. Three Candidates Part 2. Bobby Charles defends military service versus state media. In our second candidate profile on Firm, Fairness in Reporting Media, Mark Merrill here, is with Republican Governor Challenger Bobby Charles. And here are a couple of video posts. One is a still picture, so we'll read from it and make sure you have the information here, as you can see on Mr. Charles right here. But this first one is a video that hits homegrown working people in the greater Waterville area and then some. No thanks to the deflectocrats.
Friends, I want to take you on a visit to a ghost hospital. This is Northern Light Inland Hospital in Waterville. I'm here at night, fittingly, I guess. It is a complete ghost hospital. It closed down 1 year ago after serving the state of Maine for literally 80 years. And it is not alone. The neonatal units in Holton and Waldo and other places in the state are shutting down. The bottom line is Mainers are facing a consolidation that is pushing the rates of private insurance up, in part because of our Maine care and Medicaid fraud, in part because of the fact that labor costs have gone through the roof, a 20% increase. We can't get doctors and nurses here because the tax policy, the regulatory policy, the certificate of need policy is destroying the health system in the state of Maine. We have, ironically, the oldest population in the country. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to Maine to have a premier, top-rate healthcare system that is affordable, high quality, and accessible for everybody in the state. That is part of my mission in moving to the governorship, is to try to work a way to get these hospitals incentivized, new ones to open, old ones to stay, quality care, instead of things like having the York Hospital be redlined by the Democrats, instead of things like having this wonderful hospital go out of business a year ago because it was literally losing between $1 million and $1.5 million a month. We have got to stop this. If you are a believer in that vision, BobbyForMaine.com.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, on that one, and we do appreciate his input on that, ladies and gentlemen. As we continue the program here on our second of three candidates for service to the state of Maine. Big changes in 2026. Now we have a profile on Mr. Charles as well, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go from that as well. Give you a little bit of a show on that. Basically, so you can all see it, folks, as we read from it. It's something at least you can see. Now, let's get that right there. Here we are. This is a preview of a little bit of a breakdown, ladies and gentlemen, from the Republican Party on the national level, okay? Basically from the top, ladies and gentlemen, right up here, Bobby Charles is a Republican politician, a U.S. Naval Intelligence officer before he was a candidate for Maine governor starting in 2024. Yeah, a little while back. Mr. Charles' campaign emphasizes public safety, economic growth, and government accountability. And lastly, right here, folks, Mr. Charles is a Maine native. Let's throw this back in the lap of Troy Jackson, who says, oh, well, you know, he's a part-time Mainer. During their debate back in March, you may recall. Well, we're going to put Mr. Jackson in the rabbit hole and throw dirt on it. You can see for yourself at bobbyformaine.gov and .com. bobbyformaine.com. He is a Maine native with a distinguished career in national security and public service and seeks to translate his experience into state leadership, primarily on law enforcement, economic reform, and conservative governance aimed at addressing Maine's current crises. And there's a lot of them, folks, and I think you know that already. Fraud, never mind the taxation that Janet Mills has put us through. Yikes. And so to continue a little bit on that, folks, before we get to an audio interview that Bobby had recently with the Voice of Maine up there in Bangor with Rick Tyler. Carry on here, just a moment. Basically, he grew up in Wayne, Maine, in a family shaped by public service and modern means, with a mother working as a public school teacher. He attended Maranacook High School and later studied at Dartmouth, Oxford, and Columbia Law, preparing for a career in public service while remaining committed to the state of Maine. There you go. Troy Jackson, part-time Mainer. Go stick it, pal. Mr. Jackson, that is. His professional and public service background had an extreme record in government and national security, which we will soon hear about, and began his career in the Reagan White House, and later served as chief counsel to the U.S. House National Security Subcommittee. In other areas, folks, Mr. Charles' career in gubernatorial campaign, while he was running, as you know, for the Blaine Mansion, the governor's position, with 7 other candidates, by the way. Duly qualified, I want to say as well, for the ones we've interviewed. We have a few more to go before June 9th gets here. But Bobby's campaign emphasizes public safety, economic growth, and government accountability, as you heard, but he has pledged to reduce crime, cut taxes, reform Maine care, and address what he describes as inefficiencies and corruptions in state systems. He has also proposed policies such as work requirements for able-bodied adults receiving government-funded health care and eliminating the state income tax within 4 years. Very impressive goal, of course. In summary, on this particular CCRC, it is a national Republican organization. Mr. Charles is a native of Maine with a distinguished career in national security and public service and seeks to translate that experience into state leadership. Platform, as you see already, centers on law enforcement, economic reform, and conservative governance aimed at addressing what he views as Maine's current crises. And as mentioned just a bit earlier, folks, a lot of crises going on. So one more part here, folks, as we introduce another segment here on Bobby Charles, as we are firm, Mark Merrill here, on 3 candidates that we plan on covering in a 72-hour period. This one on Bobby Charles as he defends his military service versus state media. So, we continue. Now this next one, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, a few ugly faces that we just as soon rather not show. We're not, believe it or not, promoting the Democrats. God knows they've done enough damage as it is, don't you think? At least I hope so anyway, for all your parts and mine and my children and my grandchildren. Yours too, for that matter. This means a lot to this state, folks. So what this basically says here on a post from Bobby Charles back on May 1st, he says they, meaning the Democrats, aren't even hiding the corruption anymore. Duh. By the way, what's dipshit doing in here with state of Minnesota? I don't understand why they even brought him to Maine to promote Democrats. He was here for a Graham Plattner. He wasn't here for Janet Mills. But Janet Mills showed up anyway. Yike. It is truly surreal, posts Bobby back on May 1st. A governor who oversaw the largest welfare fraud operation in U.S. history, Janet Mills, then pretended to discover it, and talking about Mr. Waltz as well, was a celebrated keynote speaker for a convention that hopes to elect an avowed communist to the United States Senate. Don't need that. That's for daggone sure. So there's that part, ladies and gentlemen. A brief statement, but at least something that gets to the point. So as we continue on, ladies and gentlemen, as we shall do here on Firm, Mark Merrill here, Fairness in Reporting Media, about 3 candidates getting to the down and dirty of it, and the truth of the matter, as you might call it. Now, getting back to it, folks, we're going to make a minor adjustment here so that you can see Mr. Charles a lot better. Thank you for joining us here on Firm. We are always available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on YouTube, X, and now Substack for your convenience for all of our podcasts on truth, facts, reality, and common sense. I'm sure Mr. Charles would agree. Just one more item, folks, before we hear that, or part of that interview with the WVOM host. Back on, I believe it was September, just after Labor Day of 2025, a few months ago, Bobby Charles posted on Facebook, he will not stand by while Maine's elections are compromised. Today, meaning September 6th of 25, I demanded action and has called on FBI Director Kash Patel to investigate illegal aliens voting in Maine. Here is the heading on that, folks. We're going to show it to you right this close so you can see right here. He sent it to FBI Director Kash Patel. Who about? Oh. The topic is Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows' statement that illegal aliens are registered to vote in the state of Maine. Mr. Patel, I write you today with deep concern over recent revelations regarding the integrity of Maine's elections in the video that has now circulated widely. Secretary of State Bellows openly admitted that illegal aliens have been registered to vote in our state. This is not speculation or rumor. It is on-camera admission by the Chief Elections Officer of Maine, which, by the way, she is a derelict. Why is she a derelict? She remains as Secretary of State of Maine while running as a candidate for governor of this state. Conflict of interest, folks. Don't forget it. She's breaking the law as we speak, and has been ever since she announced and tried to get Donald Trump off of the 2024 ballot, along with Colorado, back in the early days of 2024. Don't forget it. To wrap this portion up, folks, so you get the point, he's sending this to Mr. Patel, Director, FBI, Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., but as someone who has been defending the rule of law and the sanctity of our Constitution, I cannot stand by, says Mr. Charles, while Maine's elections are compromised. We need action, transparency, and results before faith in our electoral system is permanently damaged. I look forward to your immediate action to this matter and to working with you to ensure Maine elections remain free, fair, and limited to citizens of the United States. Respectfully, Bobby Charles. Bobby at bobbyformaine.com. That doesn't say it all, folks. I don't know what does. You want to keep pushing the ticket there about Democrats, that it's like they're in charge, and even though they have the majority in the Maine House, the Maine Senate this past 8 years, damn it. The governor who could care less about people, you specifically, the Maine citizens of this fantastic vacation land of ours that's been ruined almost to the point of bankruptcy. Nothing left for your children to enjoy, lakes and parks and rivers and streams and the ocean, to go fishing, inland to go hunting. Garbage. Now, folks, next up, from the Bangor Daily News, an article debunking Mr. Charles' military record of Navy service. And he said in this brief intro, before we do play it, folks, back on May 7th, posted on Mr. Charles' website, the Bangor Daily News published a series of articles attempting to rewrite the record of frontrunner Bobby Charles' federal service in the wake of the September 11th attacks and during his Assistant Secretary of State for International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. The Charles campaign is releasing on the record statements from the three of the men who actually served alongside Bobby: a retired Navy commander, a former U.S. ambassador, an acting inspector general, IG he refers to in there, of the State Department, and retired Air Force colonel who ran the largest police academy in the world under Bobby's direction. His direction. Here's the introduction from Rick Tyler on a recent WVOM Radio interview, and Bobby Charles himself, folks.
Bangor Daily News reporter Sawyer Loftus, I said blew the dust off because some of these are old, audits and reviews from, and when I refer to watchdogs here, this is to whom I'm referring, okay? The State Department's Office of Inspector General, the Pentagon, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. Now, this is not an anonymous blogger. It's not like Crash, whatever his name is. These are not political operatives. These are federal watchdogs, or a federal watchdog, singular, that's raised some concerns, and you can consider them serious, about, listen carefully, about the bureau that Bobby Charles led between 2003 and 2005. And the concerns, well, if you read the writing of Sawyer Loftus, he uses those audits and translates them into concerns about poor management, alleged weak accountability, alleged contractor oversight, and allegedly whether the police training and counter-narcotics missions actually worked. I used allegedly, I have to. Now, before anyone runs too far in either direction, can we take a moment, listen for some balance? This report, as I read it, as I understand it, this reporting does not say Bobby Charles personally caused failures of Iraq and Afghanistan, the failures. That would be ridiculous. No one person caused that. No one assistant secretary, no bureau chief, not one State Department official. Those wars involved, and you know this, the State Department, the Defense Department, the White House, Congress, military commanders, foreign governments, private contractors, and decisions stretching over years and over many administrations. fair to first ask your reaction to what Sawyer Loftus and the Bangor Daily News published, sir?
This is that funny season when I'm going to call it the season of fake news, when it becomes more and more palpable to those who are seeing the political race here that I am likely to win the nomination, and frankly, given my life experience, may win the governorship. And that being the case, I think it terrifies a lot of these organizations. Don't forget that the Bangor Daily News, as reported in the Maine Wire in April of 2025, got $2.5 million from the Democrats in order to do quote-unquote public affairs. But I read that story. Of course, before we read the story, they said they were going to write a story talking about accountability. So I ended up reaching out to a number of experts in the field, including those who'd worked with me, the Undersecretary of Management, the acting IG, former principal deputy, the individual that I employed to set up with me the police training operation, a former Air Force colonel on Iraq police, Navy personnel. I brought everybody to the table. Of course, they ignored virtually everything that I brought to them, which is, it's just an education for me in a way. The aggressive push of false stories. I now kind of have a better sense of what Trump went through, where, we used to talk about the media, the legacy media, as being biased, but really they're not just biased. They create falsehoods and then push them. So the reality is that I did 5 very basic but very significant things during wartime, and that basically ran the largest part of all the operations that the State Department did, and they were very simple. I ran all counter-narcotics programs globally, and that really focused on legislation that tied to something basically called Plan Colombia, where we brought down major cartels, we eliminated the production of heroin and cocaine, and then the ripple effect outward into the Andean counter-drug region. In fact, I found it really interesting that the IG's report that they wanted to talk from, and there are many of them, I called the IG and on the Bureau myself, but it says on page 1, INL did an effective job of planning and coordinating counter-narcotics programs in Latin America, including the Andean Counter-Drug Initiative. So that actually is 7 programs. The second thing I did is we had an air wing. Most people don't understand, wouldn't have no reason to know that the United States State Department is the largest armed air force outside of the Pentagon. And I brought their operational readiness from 60%, which is average. The U.S. Air Force today is about 60%, to 85%. No more hangar queens. Put in metrics, completely changed the way they did operations, and that was hugely effective. The third thing I did was the United States Congress, and particularly the appropriators, trusted me, and the President trusted me, and Colin Powell trusted me, and they said, you know what, we're going to give you specifically the mission of setting up and training the Iraqi police. Now, you got to remember, we're still at war over there at that time. It's a very hostile environment. So I set up a major operation, literally like the University of Maine on the desert, out in Al-Aqaba. Jordan set up 9 C-130s to go back and forth, literally trained 35,000 police. At the same time, they asked me to train the Afghan police, so there was no infrastructure. I set up 7 different locations: Gardez, Kunduz, Kandahar, Jalalabad. We set up and trained the Afghan police. One of the funny things in that BDN article is they say, which, by the way, I'll call the Bobby Derangement Network now. They decided that they thought it was a bad thing that the Afghans were illiterate. Well, the Afghans are illiterate. That's the problem. You have to do everything clinically over there. You have to do it, show them how to use a 9mm. Show them how to do what they do. So, and the last thing I did, which is in many ways the most important thing that they completely ignored, and the testimonials are powerful testimonials saying, Bobby Charles did things nobody's ever done before to straighten up the State Department, and Colin Powell thought so. And they included basically fundamentally putting accountability measures, just like we need in Maine right now, on a multi-billion-dollar operation. So what did I do? I called the Inspector General in myself on the Bureau, on the department. I said, I want you to rip this apart for me, which is exactly what I'll do at the state level. I want investigators to rip this place apart so that we know where all the fraud is. And then I started removing bureaucrats, which they hated. If you're an agent of change, they hate you. Of course, some of the folks that talked to the IG, they hated the fact that Bobby Charles was coming in and turning all their stones over. I ended contracts. I broke up contracts for competition. Another thing we need in the state of Maine. I cut programs that were wasteful. Another things they hated. I got contractors to pay back money to the United States government. I put $20,000 penalties a day for failure of late delivery. And I put oversight in place that was permanent. And, of course, you can't clean up everything overnight. It's a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar mess in that case. But you know what? We made unbelievable progress. And one of the things this IG report says, just two very simplistic things. It says at a period of extraordinary challenge, which is exactly what it was, we're in the middle of a war trying to make things happen. They had, quote, a solid record of achievement in Iraq, Afghanistan, and other programs. And at the end, it says, which I also think is accurate but important, achieved significant progress in strengthening financial management controls. If there is anything that the state of Maine needs right now, it is those things. They need accountability, they need fiscal management, people who manage huge government programs as well as CEOs of a private company, which I've done both. They need program outcomes that are real. We need Maine Care to work. We need these things to actually have outcomes. You need efficiency, and you need support for law enforcement counter-narcotics. So it's like two puzzle pieces fitting together. And what the BDN hates, and the reason that they did this preemptive story, is they know that when I shine the bright light on the Democrat, whether it's Bellows or Shaw and his disastrous time, or Pingree and her New Americans office, or Troy Jackson again, this is exactly what's going to happen. I am going to rip up the place, and I'm turning it around so that it turns into an accountable government.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. And that was just a short segment of the interview with WVOM and Rick Tyler on The Voice of Maine. For more information on candidate Bobby Charles and his previous military career, biography, contact information, please go to bobbyformaine.com, and we will make sure that those links are posted as well in our comments section on this program. Or you can send a message also to Bobby at bobbyformaine.com. Also, Bobby at bobbyformaine.com. As always, folks, we are firm. Mark Merrill, as always, your host here. Get a hold of us anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right up here at fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com, fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com. As previously mentioned, you find our programs on YouTube, X, and Substack. Stay safe, everyone. Pray for our state, and pray for what happens on June 9th primary for the Republicans, and find out who's going to be the opposition heading into November. Peace to all.